Juan, thanks for joining today, man.
I'd love to be here. I'm glad you have me.
Absolutely. Juan Espinoza, storyteller, you're an author, you've served in the military, and thank you for your service. You know, and you cover a lot of very big subjects when, as far as I don't know, people would call it content, but I mean, you're talking about the real life, the pains, the resilience, transformations, and purpose. I love that all the big words that you kind of have in there with such depth and meaning. And I think kind of a springboard, in the sense is, if I may just kind of ramble for a second here, because I do feel inspired by the depth of that. It's there. We carry these. I'll use the word pain because we kind of talked about that, the deep stuff, the deep work, and there can be these kind of dualities too, in the overcoming, so a challenge, and then the ease of process, or finding our purposes, and the challenges and the resilience and the transformations, and pulling all that together. But I think in really kind of some of your process, and I do want to hear more about your book as well, of course. But I think some of that stuff is like, really, maybe, where did it start? Where did your journey start with really kind of the identification and awareness of what this is, to improve ourselves, and then to be of service, and all this. So, a little bit of background would be great.
So I think a big thing for me was I've addressed pain early on. I was in the military, 18, first generation, very first person in my family to actually go into the military. I went back in 2010, 2011. So like in Afghanistan, that was like height of the war type stuff.
Hmm.
So when I addressed the pain of losing the brothers I served with, the people I crack jokes with, the people I've known their families with, there was that pain. I had that. And when I came back from that deployment, I had to basically come home to bury my mother.
Hmm.
So I had this pain where as a typical male or just individual that doesn't want to show weakness, you bury those things, you numb them,
Sure.
you
Yeah,
avoid
you
them.
kind of put it down in that depth of just like, it'll go away maybe if I ignore it, or just don't
E-
have to process it.
exactly. I think that's a big thing is if you avoid it, like it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not there, it's it's not there. But in reality, pain doesn't work that way. It always seeps
Mm.
through the cracks and it'll eventually come back in a later date and it might affect your life personally. So that's where I come to write my book, is where it hit me all at once. And that's where I just addressed it in one time. And I think the big thing is when you face your pain and actually feel your purpose, you can use that anger, you can use that fuel to actually motivate you to be better, to be a better person, to be a better father, spouse.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing is we have to do that.
Yeah. I'm glad that you shared it and recognized turning that into fodder or fuel, the ignition of the greatness. I hate to say it, but a lot of the great things and the big growths come from the pain, the recognition. In times of ease and complacency, we're not spurred on as much. I think sometimes life has to kick us in the butt to really get out of it, which sucks, but I think that's part of it.
But I think the in reality is it's not a lot of people want to actually address their pain. So that's why
Sure.
they're in the same position they are, years later, because it's hard. It hurts, right? No one wants to like feel that pain. No one wants to be hurt again. But I think if you actually look at pain from a different perspective, it can actually it can teach you something. The
Yeah.
question is, are you willing to learn?
There you go. That's a great point. I think, yeah, there's certain things that we don't want to. I don't know if it's even facing. I think it's just the recognition too. And when you were talking about, kind of burying that, I had this kind of image that kind of came to mind of like seeding it. We plant seeds. Like, we usually, I mean, I don't want to usually say, but in the sense of like, I'm going to plant seeds to grow something prosperous, but we also plant weeds too. There's times where we go down deep and they come up through the cracks, and maybe you don't even recognize them. They're subtle. And sometimes they maybe even come back bigger and meaner, in those depths and shadows.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is when you're planting something, what are you planting?
Yeah.
Right? It's not maybe not just for yourself, but maybe your kids, the future
Yeah.
generations. When we plant seeds, it's always like that theory where it's okay, it's gonna be this nice, awesome tree, right?
Yeah,
It's gonna
yeah,
be the beautiful thing that we can see from
right.
generations to come, but reality, it might just be weeds.
Yeah,
You know, it might be fluff, it might be pain. Um, so I think the question is, what are you planting?
right. Absolutely. So, kind of turning that, I guess, when I think of resilience too, using that, and then kind of like the driver to find something. It's like, is it to find fulfillment, find purpose, and I guess how do you view some of that purpose? You hear people talk about like, purpose feels like you're just making progress or achieving the goal, or is it the process or is it the goal? You get into all that, but I guess where are your kind of thoughts and feelings on purpose driven lives?
I think the big thing is, what do you enjoy doing that you're not paid to do, right? What do you enjoy doing that most people won't do? You know, for example, like I work 18, 20-hour days to connect with people, to talk with them about their pain, to push my message, but it doesn't feel like a 9 to 5 job, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel draining in that aspect because I enjoy what I'm doing. So when people look at purpose, just look at your life in general, like what do you enjoy doing that
I think sometimes, oh, actually, I'll add a third one too. Sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a waypoint. You can see it out there. I know that I have to set sails towards this waypoint, towards this proverbial lighthouse, and the winds may take me this way or that way. And you know, I'm trying to think like, with that, just taking the first step. I think sometimes too there can be buildup, and you mentioned it too about not wanting to even face it or acknowledge it. But I think sometimes too is sometimes we want to do it and we don't know how to start, or what's that? Is it a little step? Is it a big step? And kind of making those changes.
with that, I just tell people just to do it. Just
Yeah.
figure it out as you go. I think when I wrote my book, like I wasn't an author, like I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know
Yeah.
like anything of how like publish or edit or proofread or cover designs. I just did
Yeah.
it.
Quick too, didn't you?
Yeah. So when I wrote my
Yeah.
book, it was in 2 days.
Oh
And
my God.
then after that, I just like, okay, well, I have to edit and then I have to proofread and then I have to cover design. Like I don't know what I'm doing. Just go with it. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people they have that analysis paralysis and
Sure.
they
Sure.
overthink things. And I tell everybody, just do it. Just figure out as you
Yeah.
go. You know, the minute you take that first step, the next step is easier, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you just got to do it.
Yeah. Action does iron out a lot. I jokingly say sometimes I'll act first, think later. And in that action, there will be things that you're gonna iterate through the process and you're gonna mess up. And have the understanding and the courage to know that I am gonna get I'm gonna potentially, well, like proverbial mess up, and I don't really buy into the word failure. I think that we have these resistance points, or we have these times where maybe um on paper, somebody would say that it was a failure, but it really doesn't. It's really still leading us forward, and through that process, that's it. Action will iron it out, I believe, to
Ex-
your point.
That's a big thing. It's really when I tell my daughter and I tell her how she looks at failures. So I tell her if you do it once, it's a lesson. You do it twice, that's a mistake. Right. So I think that's a big thing is when people do things and they might fail, like that's life.
Yeah.
This is how it is. But if you actually try and then learn something from that failure, you can actually learn to improve yourself and just keep trying. You have to
Yeah.
keep trying.
Where do you think self-sabotage kinda comes in from there?
I think the self-sabotage comes to life in general. We're in a world now where it's very instant gratification. You have Facebook, you have Instagram, social media, and it's, everybody shows the good stuff, right? I'm on the yacht, I'm on the beach, I'm with my
Sure.
family, but they're not showing the bad stuff. So I think that's a big thing. We compare ourselves to them. Like you're going to fail every time unless you're in
Mm,
that position. So just embrace yourself. Like, know it's okay to fail. Know it's okay to not have the right answer, but at least you're trying and actually
yeah,
being your true self. I think that's a big move forward for the rest of us.
yeah, no, it really is. And then it was while we were kinda talking about that too, I was also thinking about there's the self-sabotage, but there can be a fear of success, in there as well. And if I may, I was gonna say is, kinda thinking about that, fear of success. Sometimes we're in a space now that sometimes it's just as simple as like, I have this and I don't want it. And I want this. And I'm trying to work towards it, but not seeing evidence and things like that. And then there's this idea too, that I think the analysis paralysis can set in or overwhelming, because some of it is that the person who in the position I want or the life I want or something is that I'm going to go a little bold where that person is going to be a different person. And sometimes that's scary. There's could be change, the distance between who I am today that doesn't have this, whatever I'm thinking of, and in that terms of what I want. Sometimes there is a breaking of who I am today to become the person I want to. And I think there can be fears, deep fears built in there.
That's a big thing is when you think about the person I want to be versus the person
Yeah.
I am, it's the same person.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just embracing your authentic self, the
Yeah. Yeah.
pros and the cons. That's the only difference. The person that's like in that position you want to go into, they're like, okay, this person's so successful. They launched a lot of books or, podcasts, whatever the case is.
Yeah. Big time speaker or something that they're on
Yeah.
stage, with thousands of people, and that's all
Exactly.
you're singing and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. But you don't see the flaws they have or the battles they had to battle to get to that position. They're the same
Mhm.
exact position that people are in now. The only difference is they embraced it and they learned from it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think too that, you, we talked about this just before we got on too, about even podcasting here and this form of communication and exchange with because we're sitting here together and it's a co-creation. We're both kind of sharing and expressing and asking, and it's a very interesting thing. And, there's ebbs and flows to this too. Like using the example of somebody on stage that's speaking to thousands of people. We don't know what the trials and tribulations to get there, or whatever the version of that is. And they've sold, they have 20 bestsellers or something, and you're on your first or whatever. Yeah. And, and I think too is that, there's flows. There's times where I'm just like, what am I doing? Is this the right thing? Or, we are human. So we have those moments. And I think some of it is our resilience to be able to bounce either through or beyond them, quickly. And if you do it enough and you feel strong enough, you're able to kind of get through them instead of linger there and stew in it.
Yeah. So that's honestly what I'm doing now. Honestly, all these
Yeah.
podcasts I'm on, I'm just like, I'm watching I think the first one I was on, I was like, I did so bad. Like, this is awful. Like, I just remember doing it. And I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever done. And then I've actually watched it. I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't too bad. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We overanalyze ourselves. And I think the big thing is just, what can you improve on and what did you do
Yeah.
good? The good and the bad. And, don't
Yeah.
just focus on like, I look very handsome when I did that podcast. Look, also at the same time, I was like, well, maybe I should have said,
Yeah.
as many
You're like,
times.
my beard was very well groomed.
I think the big thing is we judge ourselves too hard nowadays. And
Yeah, there's sometimes this unrealistic standard. And this ties into what you said too with the social media, where somebody's sitting on a private jet or skiing in Aspen, and you're like, well, I'm driving in garbage weather right now to something I don't want to do. And there's this unrealistic, it's not even a real thing. There's just this imagined, because that's the other thing too. Whether it's real or imagined, it still feels real to us. There's still a potential weight that we're applying to it.
yeah, I think that's the big thing is really, you're just focus too much on them. Just focus on you. Like,
Yeah.
do you drive a 2009 Camry or, do you
Mhm.
drive a 2007 Honda Civic? Like,
Mhm.
if you got it, flaunt it. Like, who cares? You're not driving a Benz. That's fine, And I think this, but at the end of the day, it's you. Just be you. Like, it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
we're not going to judge you on being you. Like, sure, people are going to judge. That's fine. But if they're judging you on being yourself, they're probably questioning their own insecurities at the time.
Yeah. Agreed. It is a lot about others when you're interaction, in the co-creation or in the interaction and the communication and conversation. And, it's, as adults, we're in a lot of different work situations, and somebody says something, happens to all of us, I believe, and kind of sets us off on a trail. But like, if you were to really be able to put yourself in that person's shoes or have some empathy, so it's really about them. There's some reflection they're working on a lot of times, maybe sometimes people are just being mean, but there's still something deep there that they're really working through to either lash out or just say something very benign, but we take it in a certain way. And it happens, those interactions, and to be able to come through those.
Definitely. I think, when you go to the gym, right? And they see this guy that's like super just jacked, super buffed out. And it's like maybe he likes doing that, or maybe he's trying to bury his pain. Or you have someone that actually is the loudest person in the room. Like maybe they're trying to show that they have that soft side of them, but they don't really want to show it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing is when we address our just being vulnerable to ourselves, we're okay with who we are, yeah, our
Yeah.
imperfections and our perfections, like, we're okay with it.
Yeah. There is something to be said about that too. There's a quote I was trying to remember, but it's almost tied to kind of just the idea of us off into obscurity. I think it was Oscar Wilde or something like that. I shouldn't quote, I shouldn't, but I'll just kind of paraphrase. It was something along the lines of what's worse than people talking poorly about you is people not talking about you at all. And what I'm saying is because this other reflection of these other people, sometimes there's those insecurities or they don't feel the personal value or something like that. So there's they're employing onto other people. And then again, the trail of that is us receiving it. And how are we going to respond? Because it's the only thing we have control over is just our response and how we process it.
Exactly, I think the big thing is so a lot of people, like, go through their lives, they feel like they don't feel noticed, right? Either friendships, relationships, they just feel like, no one's seeing me,
Yeah.
and a big part
Yeah.
of
Nobody's seeing me for me, like the deep.
exactly, and I think that's a big thing. Chapter of my book, I call it the warpath, right? And a lot of people, when they see that book, they're like, "Well, it's military." It's like, no, it sounds military, but it's not. So basically, what it means is to commit with a cause that with everything you have. If you
Mhm.
don't feel seen, there's two ways you can go about it. You can either make them see you, or you can basically make it where it's not an option, right? You can make it or
Yeah.
take it. It's
Yeah.
it's one way or the other. And I think that's a big thing. It's really if you don't feel seen, make sure they see you.
Yeah.
Do whatever you can to make sure that happens.
Yeah. One other question I was kind of had, was like about something before, and this actually kind of ties into it too. But it's kind of there's a lot of sayings about I'll call it like your network or the people in your sphere, your close sphere, and stuff like that too, because there's such a heavy influence into that. Like you'll hear like your network is your net worth and other things like that. But how do you feel about that environmental, your close sphere?
So I think the big thing with that is where's your 3 a.m. friend, right? The person you call
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you need the most. Not the person you call when it's like you're having a good time in your life. The person you call when like you're like in a really bad spot. That's your network.
yeah,
That's the people you count on. Don't worry about the people that just like you on, Facebook or Instagram. The people that actually you call when you're like a really bad spot in your life, that's your network.
yeah.
I
There was actually, oh, sorry, I was going to say, is there was a saying I heard too recently was like, don't eat with somebody you wouldn't starve with. And it's kind of the 3 a.m., the 3 a.m. person. And there's a depth to that, and,
yeah,
and having that person have sway or have weight in your life. When somebody really loves you, they want the best for you. So if there's something you feel like as a criticism, they're here to lift you up. But there are people here to just criticize you, and that's not your sphere. That's not your circle.
yeah, I think that's where you have to keep that circle small, right? You gotta keep those 3 a.m. friends. You gotta keep, the
Yeah.
family you trust or people that you trust with your with everything, the good and the bad. And then you also have that other circle where it's, the people that, that like your status when you're doing good. That's
Mm.
cool, but don't rely on them too much. It's the
Yeah.
3 a.m. people, the people you trust. That's what, I think that's what makes a huge impact on your life.
Yeah. There's, we've all had those ups and downs too. And I remember even as an adult, there's a couple big crashes I had just as far as like closing a business and stuff like that. And it was, um, the people that, they're there for, those times are good, but those times are bad. And the criticisms and the ridicules kind of come out just very subtly and things like that. And the heavy judgments. So it's like, it's interesting who's kind of there and the recognition and stuff. And it's not any slight on anybody, like that's, again, this is just it's all human interaction, and I'm not perfect. I'm sure I was that to somebody else at some point, I have to admit. But it is important, and I'm not gonna say it's tough because that's not right, but I think if you find people, cherish them, take care of them, help them up too. Make sure that you're also feeding them if they're feeding you too, as far as that dedication.
Definitely. The big thing is when you realize those people that you have in your life, like cherish them, if they need help, help them out, but also realize that not just friends, but family as well. Like a lot of family we have in our lives, they're that I want to, like your post when you're doing good, but when you reach out, if I need someone to help me move, I'm busy, right? You have those family members too, and that's okay. Like we've been there in that position, but at
Yeah,
the same time, it comes down to effort. Like, are they putting as much effort into you as you're putting into them? If they're not,
yeah,
maybe dial it back a little bit. Like, not realize like if they're a hey, friend or they're just I like you when you're doing awesome type of friend.
yeah. It's interesting because the conversation, sometimes you never know where these conversations are going to go on a podcast, and it's interesting that we're on this kind of connection point with the friends because it's also I think that there's seasons of it's seasons of our life. There's seasons of my life that I would go out and drink and party and you find those friends. They just are all of a sudden out of the work. And now you have this surrounding group of friends that's your bond. Sometimes there's things like music or whatever. You have friendships in different arenas, or you mentioned the gym um but there can be people too that it's a very subtle thing. And I've had them in my life where it's almost like they want you to be broken, or you build this thing where it's like you're complaining to each other and you become the complaining friends. And then you're like, I don't want to complain anymore. This doesn't feel good. I want to grow and to prosper. And then it's like, it's kind of what you built together and you co-created together. And so I don't want to say they want you broken, but that's kind of, I think sometimes it's kind of the expectation that just happens.
Because it's relatable. They can
Yeah.
relate to it, right? They can relate to being broken, they can relate to question life or why things haven't turned out the way they wanted to.
Yeah.
But the minute you start doing good, now they're like, they can't relate to it. So that's
Right.
why they're like, maybe trying to bring you back to their level because it's relatable. I think that's a big thing is when we start growing as individuals, we'll learn that not everybody that's our friends or family that want us to succeed. And
Mhm.
that's okay. But also realize that they're on a portion of their life or their direction of their life where they want to stay consistent and you don't want to. I think that's a big thing is just to address that. Once you actually do that, then you can actually realize, okay, well, this person's my 3 AM friend or my like my post type of friend.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. There's kind of that surface level. And I think too is that some of it ties into expectations. Um, if there's an expectation that was built by somebody else or yourself, and now you're disrupting what that is. So the dynamic changes. So um, the dynamic changes, the environment changes. But and here we're kind of focused on some of the negative side of that with those, but there is the growth friends. And honestly, even to when you go out on that journey, in that sense, for the seasons, you have the ones that were maybe when you were younger, the drinking friends, and now you actually go on that journey of self-discovery or overcoming challenges and want to grow and find mentors and learn. And there's a lot of beautiful people on that path too. uh you know
It's confusing, right?
yes.
So I talked to a friend probably a couple hours before this podcast. She was going through a personal trauma. And I just basically asked her, like, just tell me what's going on. And she said, like, well, if I tell you, you're going to walk away. I was like, well, just tell me. Why would I walk away? You already told me it's complicated. So why wouldn't I walk away now? And the crazy thing is she said it was very stressful. I asked her why. Because it's confusing because no one's really there. But when you're actually there as, being your heart, being your true self, people look at that as a very confusing type of way. Like, well, I never had someone that was there or never had a friend that was there, a family member that was there through the hard times. A lot of people will leave when times get tough. I think that's
Sure.
when you shift that perspective and show them like, well, I'm not here for the good stuff. I'm here for the bad stuff too. People are like, what?
Yeah. I wonder too, there's sometimes like even you saying that there was kind of a self-reflection I was thinking too. And I almost wonder, and I'm just as far as a general thing, but using myself as an example is almost pushing people away when they even tried to help me. I could almost kind of feel like I'm sure I've done that to people too, where they were sincere about it. And for some reason, maybe I'm couple things. Maybe I wanted to wallow in my, crybaby time or something. I wanted to have my pity party, and I didn't want help from there, or I didn't have faith or trust that, somebody really did want to have my back. I think there's times like that too.
Oh, easily. Like I've done that. Like, I'm trying to just like I said, in a little crybaby phase, I'm just trying to like let me just sorrow my emotions, right?
Yeah,
It's confusing because like you don't have a lot of people that there's not a lot of people that are there for like the good and the bad times. So when they
sure.
tell you they're truly there, you're just like questioning their intentions at that point.
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
more of just like a survival instinct that we all have. But I think if
yeah.
we actually
I
try
agree.
to like see what they're trying to show us and actually let them show us, then we can actually probably grow. But I wouldn't blame anybody for doing that. Like you're just protecting yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'd say too, like you even mentioned when you were in 20s about, being a guy or something and, not expressing it and kind of bringing it down. And there is some of that stuff where we, kind of I don't want to overgeneralize with men and, because I'm sure there's women do this too, but just kind of go back to the cave and just kind of, huddle and I need to do this by myself and, yeah, in there as well. So,
It's that showing weakness. I think that's the big thing is what a lot of us have, not just males, but females as well. If I cry, people think I'm weak, right? I can't hold
mhm,
my own. I can't support my family. That's not the case at all. We are all vulnerable at one point in time, and it's okay to be vulnerable. But that whole persona of just like showing weakness is just ingrained in just our being now, right? You want to be this
mhm.
macho, you want to be this masculine guy or this,
Yeah.
this
Or you have all the answers or whatever it is, or,
exactly. You have this like strong, independent woman type persona.
mhm,
But reality is we all break at a certain point in time. And that's okay. Like, doesn't mean you're weak. Doesn't mean you're this frail person. It's just the fact that you have that point where you break. And it's okay.
yeah. Do you kind of feel like this is actually a little bit of a sidewind question in the sense of like we kind of talked about social media and we really kind of, talking about this connection point with friends and stuff. Do you feel like, or maybe it goes the other way? Has some of this stuff kind of distanced us with this, or has it kind of drawn us together in your opinion with some of the social media and, because we're more accessible than ever, obviously, than we were, 10, 15 plus years ago.
So I think with the big thing with social media, right? It's like this like 50-50, right? So
Mhm.
your social media shows the good stuff, but also the personal connection shows you that, you can tell when someone's hurting, right? You meet your
Sure,
sister, you
sure.
meet your spouse, you can just look at that, look at their eyes, just look at the way their demeanor. You can tell like something's wrong. You're not telling me. I know it.
Hmm.
Versus like social media, they just show like I'm smiling in this profile picture or so I think it's a little in between. So I can't really
Yeah,
say it's like it distances us, but it just makes us gauge things in a different perspective.
sure. Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah. I honestly, what you kind of touched on too is kind of honing the instinct through the connection and through the interpersonal connections and honing those instincts and seeing that and really kind of understanding where somebody is or reading the room and in that regards too. Because we do put up I don't want to say, we can put up the veil or the mask or the false face and kind of seeing through that. So, I mean, I think some people can be a little bit more empathetic or sensitive to it than others. But do you find yourself being able to kind of read people in that sense?
So I can read people very quickly. But I think
Sure.
the problem is it's the effort. For example, I have one of my ex's brothers. He's actually a good friend of mine. I see him as a brother now. Actually, both of them. But one of them is very just like I can very open minded. I could talk to him directly. Like he'll tell me what he's feeling. No really issues. The other one, he has that hard wall and I have to break
Sure.
it, right? I have to, you have to share value. I have to share my vulnerabilities. And eventually he broke and, told his side of the story. So I think it comes down to effort.
Sure.
We can all sense those things, but I think some people require a little more effort to actually break those walls.
Mhm.
The question is, are we willing to put that effort in?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I mean, whether we take it on ourselves or not, we're sitting on a podcast talking about human connection, really. And and I'll just say, I'm just where's the kind of the word healing in there too, and how people recognize and the healing and keeping sight on these things. So for us, there is this, we're putting ourselves out there in this vulnerable state of sharing and and healing. So I mean, when you kind of choose, I want to say choose that path because we're doing it in a certain level sense. I don't want to say there's a responsibility with it, but it's kind of the journey that we're trying to take, the journey that we're trying to help, trying to heal, trying to put the word out. And I just wonder sometimes, like, where does it end in a sense? I mean, not where does it end? That's not even the right question, but you kind of said with the effort, it's like, how far do you go? How far do you chase? At some point, not everybody can be reached or can be healed and can be connected with. Taking that on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think when you go with that, it's really the reality is when you talk to people about healing, you actually want to like know like the deep stuff, like not the surface level stuff. Not a lot of people are ready. And that's okay.
Sure.
Right. And a lot of people want to share their vulnerabilities or their weaknesses. And maybe it's not their time, or maybe they just want to do it. You know, that's okay. But I think that when we share our vulnerabilities, we share our weaknesses with the world, we create this safe space, not only that changes us and heals us at the same time, but also we break that cycle for the future generations. So I think that's the big thing I'm aiming for. It's just like, okay, I can help us now, but maybe I can help my daughter or her kids or, their kids after that to know it's okay to be weak at times. Um, at the same time, you can't heal everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing we have to address is like, you want to try to help everybody, but sometimes we can't.
Yeah. And I do like that you said break the cycle, because there are cycles. There are programs that we run, or, kind of family dynamics that we will repeat. I'm sure we've all caught ourselves as parents that we've said words that cringe because we've heard our parents say certain things and we're like, oh my God, why did I just do that? It used to drive me nuts when I was a kid. And you kind of catch yourself, and breaking those patterns can be a powerful thing.
Exactly. I think that, like for me, typical Hispanic, right? We don't share emotions. We don't cry. Especially, come from that background and then go to my military background. It's like I got 5 years overseas, 4 years in Afghanistan. But when I share it, I all of a sudden change that. Now I got cousins, aunts, uncles that are sharing their pain.
Mhm.
You just have to be brave and take that risk. That's a risk. People are gonna look at you. Some people might look at you as a different perspective. At the same time, you're helping others while you're doing that.
Absolutely. What about, you had written in some of your communication, is about the power of forgiveness. I guess that's a pretty big subject in itself, but where's it kind of tie into what we're talking about?
So for forgiveness for me, it's I was raised by my stepmom, which she's my mom. She was there since I was 3. But my biological mom like wasn't there. She wasn't present. And I blame myself for a lot of years like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Like is it me? Like did I maybe it wasn't a good son? But then I realized it's not what I did, it's what she did. That's her choice. I couldn't make it for her, but I think forgiveness is not for other people, it's for ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
We heal ourselves if we forgive the people that did us wrong, and it's not for them, it's for us.
Yeah. I'm glad. That was a powerful statement, because honestly, I was actually really curious if that's where you're going to go with that. Because it truly is, the pains that we carry, whether, like I mentioned before, whether real or imagined, those are ours. And I think too is, even if somebody, some type of transgression or something that was done to us in a victimhood or some, well, I'm the one that's gonna, if I'm the one carrying the pain, I need to work through that. And I really agree with that too. I need to forgive myself to release that, so I can take that kind of healing journey with it. If I'm going to harbor that, I'm going to hold on to it. Just, it's
E
going to eat me up.
Oh, exactly. At the end of the day, you're hurting yourself because
Yeah.
they don't feel your pain, right?
Right.
Feeling
Oh
that
yeah. Yeah. Great point.
they're not feeling your emotion.
Right.
You're feeling it every day. So if you forgive yourself for what they did, you might not know
Yeah.
the reason why they did it. You might even agree to the reason. That's okay. But at the end of the day, you know that you did everything you could at that time. You forgive yourself.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times where, I lose sleep over something and I'm like, well, they're not losing sleep over this. I'm the one who's losing sleep over this, And, so there's a real power in that. There's actually I butcher this too, and it's like Honomonopono or something like that. And it's a process of forgiving and kind of tapping on certain meridians of but it's an interesting one. But this comes up in many cultures. This comes up a lot through the healing process, is kind of forgiveness, and then on the way to gratitude, having the joy and the gratitude for those little small wins.
I think that's a big thing. It's when we look at forgiveness, you would think at it from perspective where it's like, well, I don't want to let them off the hook, right? I'm very angry. This is what they did is it's not right. Well, life's not right. That's just how it
Right.
is. That anger
Yeah.
you hold, they don't feel it. You
Yeah.
feel it, right? So you're not letting them off the hook. You're just knowing that it happened. It might not happen for the reasons you want it to, but at the end of the day, you did everything in your right space to handle that situation. And you're just forgiving yourself for that situation. You're not
Yeah.
necessarily letting them off the hook. You're just not letting it hurt you no more.
Yeah. And honestly, I think we as humans can be much more cruel than anybody else can be. So for us to sit around and really hold that pain in anger and kind of, turn that inward. If somebody sets us off, I mean, that's the grind there. Sometimes too is I'll do that and I'll be upset and I realize that if I come back to that forgiveness, then I actually beat up on myself. I'm more upset with myself and I'm like, well, how did I get myself into this situation? And then you kind of go through those certain cycles of recognition and stuff like that too.
I think that's a big thing is when you realize like sometimes like you didn't know better.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
Like you're
Have a
just
little grace,
yeah,
like, hey, you didn't intentionally
exactly.
put yourself
It's
there.
like you're not just you didn't put yourself in the situation just be like, well, I'm here, then somehow something bad happened, but maybe you didn't know better at the time, you didn't learn.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variety that happens with those situations, so just don't judge yourself too hard on that.
Yeah. Judging the great and having some grace in that, even, and I like that you did say that too, because you were just talking about, um, it's kind of an unknowing that is part of the journey. You brought yourself here with a sense of, I'm going to use the word innocence, but just as far as an openness to be in the situation, and it escalated or it turned and you didn't anticipate it. So to be able to run with that and not harbor the pain again too, is that the lesson you gave for your daughter, where you were saying you do it once, it was, um, what was it again? It was, you do it once, it was an accident or something, or a mistake.
You do once, it's a lesson.
There you
You
go.
do it twice.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you bring yourself and you find yourself in that situation and you can respond differently and calm and but just to maintain, again, we can control our responses in that arena.
Definitely, I think the big thing is when you look at a lot of just situations, not just relationships in general, a lot of people like to repeat that cycle. Familiar, it's relatable. They know what to expect, right? You have a lot of these domestic violence relationships. They know the cycle, they know how it goes. So they leave that relationship, they go to another one that does the exact same thing. It's familiar, it's relatable. But the minute they
Yeah,
break that, it's confusing. It's new territory. They don't know how to
sure.
navigate those things, right? And I think the big thing is when you repeat that cycle, the big saying, if what was it shame on you one time, shame on you.
Yeah.
Right?
Once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly. I think that's the big thing
Yeah,
is when you have to realize, okay, well, the first time wasn't my fault. Maybe the
yeah,
second or third time, that's your fault. But people don't want to realize they don't want to look in the mirror and be like, well, yeah, well, I fell for the same person that did the exact same thing the first time.
yeah. And I mean, especially through different cycles of our life and the teens and the 20s, we repeat some of those things because it's a deep learning process of finding our way. And some of it is just slight variance. I remember dating in my 20s and it was like you'd be with somebody and you're like, I'm not sure about this, this, this. And you find somebody, all the qualities the other one didn't, but then you find out it's just a slightly different version of the one before, and you're like, "How did I get caught? How did I do this?" It's patterns. They keep recycling.
So I think with that, it's just in dating in general, what I've noticed and my experience as well, a lot of people have the 80%, they're missing that 20%. A lot of people look for that extra 20% and realize, well, the next person has 60%. Now you got to get 40%, right? Everybody wants that perfect 100% and no one's perfect. You got to deal with the goods and the bads. But I think, if you realize that, okay, well, this person like has everything I want, they might miss a few things. That's them. It's okay.
Yeah. So I've got another kind of question about you too, or about, some of the work you do as far as, combat to clarity. You have a term that, I don't know if that's part of your book or, I know it's some of the kind of the messaging that you speak on. And if I may just kind of add a little something, because I'm very curious. I want it all in your words, but when I kind of read that, it was combat to clarity because I instantly kind of thought of the field awareness and kind of be feeling like you're in the fog and not being able to gain perspective. And there's two sides to that. And the other one was like there's sometimes when you're really in the trenches of something emotionally heightened or a complex situation, it's almost like you just get really laser focused, and I don't want to say it's an either or, but I know that in my life I've experienced kind of both things. So like I'd love to kind of hear that combat to clarity.
It's the calm of the chaos.
Sure.
That's the big thing is for you realize like the world is just chaotic. Maybe the situation is chaotic, but you have your goal. You have what you're striving for. And that's like all you're worried about, right? A big perspective for me was just in Afghanistan, right? We do these like combat operations. You're getting shot at, you got people that are getting hit, but you're focused on your goal. Let's say in a relationship, right? You have, let's just say a marriage or just a relationship in general. You got the bills, you got the kids, you have worry about job, the stresses of work, but you focus on the relationship. What makes them happy? Like, let's have a date night, right? Just to focus on us. I think
Yeah.
that common chaos that people have to realize it's not a bad thing. World is chaotic as we know it in general. It's just with everything, just social media, work, relationships, like chaos. But if you
Yeah.
focus on what you want, then yeah, you'll be fine.
Do you have any things that you kind of do, like meditate or kind of find that inner quiet voice or
So for me, it was a lot of what I do is just helping people, but
sure.
journal. I,
Okay.
I tell everybody just to write it down. You don't have to share it. You can burn it. You can throw it away. It doesn't matter. As long as you get that pain off your chest and
Sure.
no longer holds that power over you no more. I think that's a big thing people don't want to do but actually like genuinely journal and look in the mirror. Like it's
Okay.
hard. Don't just be like, well, I went to work today. Like, no, look at like I went to work and I didn't really do much. I just look, I was on the screen, but I was on my phone on YouTube or whatever.
Is it kind of like, there's almost kind of automatic writing or just kind of just deep unconscious writing or you kind of get in all the levels of it? Or is it kind of like I went to work, I had this conversation, I was, cause I'm using some of the stuff we were talking about. I'm really irritated at this person now cause they set me off, or is it just, is it kind of more like that contrived thing where it's like, I really wanted to do this and I didn't do this, or do you have guidance into it? Or is it really just kind of stream of consciousness?
I think it's more of a stream of consciousness type thing. But I think when you go get as much detail as possible, how are you feeling? What did you feel when they said this? What were they doing? Right? You have to analyze everything from like a deep perspective because you can do the whole surface level stuff. Like I went to work and, Susan said this and I like that. But actually think about like, what were you feeling? What was your goals? How did she make you feel when she said that? Hard look, right? Maybe you're not in the position you want to be now. Like, okay, what are you doing to change that? Right? Are you still doing the same job you are? Are you still being in the same relationship you are? Okay.
I was gonna say too is I think, and that's really good advice because I think there's some times where I've noticed it'll be you using the word goal or what do I really want? It's it's kind of the big goal, and getting set off or veered off course or, misdirected, or if it feels like I'm not heading, that that course correction of, it's like, okay, I'm getting a tizzy here. I'm feeling chaotic. I'm, just off the rails. I'm angry or I'm whatever I am. And then it's like kind of the stop, like, what do I really want? And I think if you're, what you're kind of communicating there in the writing is that lay it out. And maybe there's an observation of kind of where I started to go off course on that. And it's like, no, stop. What do I really want? And let's start heading in that direction.
Exactly. I think that's a big thing is when you actually write it down and then read it, you're like, okay, I'm angry because of this. I'm not angry at my work. I'm angry because I don't feel like I'm being valued. I think that's when you look at the mirror, like a hard look, you can adjust those things. I think a big thing. So I don't know if you're use foul language in this podcast. So I'm gonna say what I say normally. When I think sometimes it's like a mantra I have. I say I'm the best fucking thing that ever happened. So,
Love it.
so I think that's a big thing I tell myself. And then when I look at that, I look about everything else I do. If they don't fit that mantra as like being part of that circle, you're not really, you're not going to get too much of my effort. I think we have to do that in our lives personally, work wise, relationship wise. Just if you're not getting that value that you want, address that value. If that person is not giving you that value, you might also have to take that hard look in the mirror, right? And is this person really fit? Are they willing to work for it? Are they willing to put effort? I think that's a big thing that people don't want to do, but I think it's necessary.
Hmm. No. I've got kind of, one more, question as far as, it's really kind of that I think, kind of we're coming in this conversation. So it's kind of, how do you inspire others to kind of take control of, their story and that transformation and those challenges?
So I'll give you an example. I had a old coworker. She was actually way older than me, probably a couple weeks ago, and I basically told her how I write my book and I help people with pain, address those things. And she said that I'm just filled with pain. I'm just tired of running from it. So okay,
Mm,
let's go have a drink. And I asked her, does she drink? She's like, yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's go have a drink because you're probably gonna need it. Because I'm not gonna ask you like how's your day going? I'm gonna ask you like the hard stuff. And when I address people about their pain, I ask the hard stuff. What's really giving you your pain? Like
yeah.
actually, like when I give my speeches or when I talk to people, like I try to like punch them in the throat to actually like get that message out. Like we're going for the deep stuff, and if you look deep into ourselves and look about what's really giving us this pain and
Yeah.
adjust that, you'll shift your perspective on life. You'll change your direction of how you're going once you fight that.
Yeah. Mm. Do you see some of it to kind of come back to, um, I mean, there's a lot of issues that can come up. There's like things like survival or abandonment or, lack of love or just, just being kind of this amazing, your mantra and stuff like that. There's the self-worth and things like that. In talking to these people and speaking, do you see some commonalities that kind of stand out?
A big thing is more just the vulnerability and the self worth. A
Mm,
lot of what I've seen, abandonment issues, not just like, let's just say, mother or father, but it's also spousal. That's a big commonality as well.
mhm.
But what I tell them is like, what did you do? Right? If, okay, well, you did nothing wrong. You're just being yourself. Like, how's that your fault? It's not.
Yeah.
We judge ourselves too much. We're too hard on ourselves to not progress in life. We're the best thing on this earth. We only have one life and we can dictate our life.
Mhm.
So why would we let somebody else take that away from us?
Yeah. When you were saying that too, is just, cause you kind of started out with, it's almost like picking up on a little self-expression there, but tying into the self-worth and the value, uh, into that. So that was really interesting kind of hearing. And I think there was, I had a guest on here that she kind of said it was somebody was going to start something or, set on a path. There were kind of three questions and I might butcher it a little bit, but it was basically like, it was kind of a belief pattern. It was like, first is this possible in this world? Period in a story. I want to earn something or want to get married or whatever it is for that person. Is possible? I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, it's possible. Then is it possible for me? And then if you have that reaction, you're like, oh, I don't know if it is, or do I, where is my self-worth or value in this situation? And if you're, and if you're not hitting these things when it comes to yourself, like if you feel like there's a recognition like, oh no, it's possible, but then it's not possible for me, then you're externalizing. You're like, oh, that's when you have, kind of work through some of those recognitions.
Exactly. It's a big thing. It's where you check 2 of the 3. Now you're just like, "Oh, I'm setting back. I can't do this." That's why
Yeah.
I mentioned my whole warpath where it's either make it or take it. It's one or the
Make it or
other.
take it. I like it.
Make it
Yep.
or so I think that's a big thing. It's like, well, you don't feel valued, show value, right?
Yeah.
If you don't feel seen, make yourself feel seen.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there where there's no option but to see you. And when we do that, we empower ourselves to create our own destiny, change our own lives. And I think it's very inspiring to me when I actually talk to people and they're crying because of all their pain, but also at the end of the night we're laughing and you can see that weight lifted because they don't have to hold it no more.
Yeah. That's a powerful point to be at too. The recognition or the realization that, you know, um, kind of the image of the bird in the cage that the cage door is open. Actually, it was you putting yourself into there that, and you can go anytime.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is we have this limited belief where we can only do so much because maybe our gender or maybe our demographic or maybe our age. But if we remove that and just
Yeah.
go on that warpath, right? Make it or take
Yeah.
it. Like it doesn't matter. All that doesn't matter because
Yeah.
you're doing it. You're empowering yourself.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is I like to do is when set like a big thing, like just a big idea or a big goal or a big inspiration. Sometimes it's we put the benchmarks in there like money or time or something else. I like to do the one where it's just like say, okay, remove time. Just take time out of the equation. Can you get your business to $30 million? Can you do it? But it's like just take time. Oh, yes. And then you can start working big. It's just like kind of break some of the barriers because I think some people come up with stuff so quick, knee jerk as to be like the disbelief. So personally, I like the one where you take time and money out of it. If time and money weren't in it, can you do this?
Yeah,
Okay.
that
So what's holding you back? Let's go.
exactly. I think the big thing is one I like to use is, shoot for the stars. If you fall, you might land in the sky, right? You heard that analogy?
Yeah. Or hit the
Easy.
moon or yeah, I don't remember the exact.
Like that. It's where, okay, well, you shoot high, well, you might fall short, but guess what? You're still way above where you normally were.
Yeah.
So, why not go for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to kind of end our time here, do you have any advice, to give people as far as, that we were talking about the challenges and the pains and the feeling stuck?
So usually what I tell a lot of people, it's 2 questions. One, pain is a teacher. What is it teaching you? The second one, are you broken or unbroken? That's your choice.
Beautiful. I like that. I do like that. I like both of those a lot. And the unbroken one. Do you ever have anybody that kind of gets stuck on that one?
Yeah. So I had one that was like, well, what do you mean about unbroken? I was like, well,
Yeah.
think about it. You're broken. You have like a mirror, right? It breaks. It never goes back together, but you have unbroken. It might be cracked, but it's still together.
Yeah.
And someone told me, it's like, well, it sounds like a Humpty Dumpty. I was like, maybe so, but the fact is he's still together.
Yeah. But they were stuck on it. It's like, I was always wondering if you got somebody kind of stuck on that one, but that one's good. So where can people find you, your book? What's the best way to get a hold of you or work with you?
So the best way to get a hold of me is my website. It's juanespinoza.me. I have my book on there. You can click on it. It goes to Amazon. I have my contact form where you shoot a message. If you want to actually talk about pain in general, just shoot me a message, come directly to me. I have my phone number on there as well. Um, it's not animated. So every contact information I have, it goes strictly there. I put my
Beautiful.
podcast, especially for this one that will go
Okay.
live. I'll put it on my actual page,
Awesome.
I have it on there too. So I always, tell people like I'm always here if people want to talk. Like, let's actually talk and figure this out. The big thing is we're a while back, and I told people like I'm not this like typical like church material type of guy, like, but I'm the guy that's like there when you feel like you're in hell. I'll tell you like, well, it's hot down here. Let's make some coffee. Figure this out. That's me. So
Love it.
my website, that's the best way to get a hold of me. I have my LinkedIn on the website as well, my Facebook on the website as well.
Yeah, and we'll link you in on this too, but awesome, man. Thank you so much, Juan. I appreciate you coming on today.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me and letting me share my story.
Absolutely. All right, man.
Thank you.